Hello and welcome to yet another exciting episode of Reply All. Today's episode is going to be very exciting because we're going to have some very interesting discussion with Mr. Charles Barker, who is a writer by profession. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So first things first, we'd like to know a little more about you. You've been living in Pakistan from the past 4 years, and you've been living in other countries as well. First things first, again, a little introduction, and then how is your experience going on so far?
Okay. Well, maybe I should just start by correcting your introduction.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly a writer by profession.
Okay.
More of a writer by enthusiasm.
Okay. That makes more sense.
My career, my profession is hospitality.
Okay.
And most of my career has been spent running hotels and developing hotels around the world. More recently, it's embracing tourism in the wider aspect, and I have a consultancy business in Pakistan where I promote and help and develop sustainable tourism and hospitality projects around the country.
Okay, that's great. So keeping that in mind, since Pakistan has a wider perspective when it comes to tourism, especially when it comes to north, and in winters, the southern part as well, what exactly have you felt that what should be done? What are the exact needs that our tourism industry, really requires to implement when it comes to hospitality and then sustainable tourism?
It needs to start at the top with a federal tourism development strategy. Mm-hmm. And at the moment, what is happening is each province is doing its own thing. Mm-hmm. And actually within each province, each township and area is doing its own thing. Yeah. And so people who've got some land and they want to have a hotel or a guest house or a restaurant, they're just building it. Wherever they want, without any particular regard to building codes and health and safety issues, and without regard to waste management and so forth. And the result of that is a lot of places, beautiful towns and villages in valleys which hitherto have been unspoilt are now starting to get wrecked because of overdevelopment. And so there needs to be a central planned policy for the sustainable development of tourism, which looks at every aspect of it, from construction to the rules and regulations to star ratings. Everybody calls themselves a 5-star deluxe hotel, but
when you go inside, there's nothing, right?
And the problem with that is that you have visitors who have an expectation. Okay, I'm going to go and stay in a 5-star hotel. Yeah. And so they're inevitably disappointed. And that portrays the industry badly for the whole country. So that's what's needed urgently. And then having had that policy developed, it's got to be implemented and followed up so that there's an enforcement process to make sure that the rules are being applied.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that training is much more important at this level rather than spending an amount to restructure things? Because most of the people, especially when you go to the north, it's in the hands of local industry or local people. Or you can say one of the big shots from the federal, they have taken control of most of the important places. I'm not going to name them. I hope you understand where my point is going at. But at this point, do you think that, especially when the situation of economy in Pakistan, it's going, down the drain every day. So keeping the budgets in mind, which are almost, there's no money to spend in this industry. Do you think at this point awareness campaigns and trainings would do a lot better than spending an amount to restructure things?
I think one has to work on several fronts.
Okay.
It's not investment or training. Training has to be a constant part of even an advanced, well-developed industry. Yeah. I think that the problem, though, is, and this is not just a case in Pakistan, it's everywhere. Everything starts at the top. So if you have a good boss, if the general manager is switched on and understands the service concepts and the basics of hospitality, and is visible and is out there with his staff, with his customers, then you have a ripple effect, and the training takes place on the job. It's happening all the time because the manager's there, and his supervisors, and you have this sort of pyramidal effect. And more often than not, the problem is the weakness of the management. And so you can do as much training as you like, but if the manager isn't there to keep on top of it and enforcing it and reinforcing the training standards, people just forget it and do their own thing.
Yeah.
And that's good for Pakistan, it's good for the UK, it's good for Australia, state, anywhere. It's all about maintaining standards through organized management.
Yeah, and I think responsible tourism is something that we're also missing on a lot, and that comes from both ways, as a customer's point of view and people who are, in this hospitality industry. When you go to these places, especially, Skardu or Hunza, which are perfect, picture perfect, and then you see these ugly constructions happening. The locals have started calling it a jungle of concrete now, which is a shame. These places were, meant to be so, lush green and, beautiful mountains, very natural, and now the nature is slowly and gradually it's being taken out. And then it's happening from the people's end who are going there visiting from other parts of the country. They're littering the places and they're overspending and they're booking the places with huge number of people. So how do you think that responsible tourism can be created at this point, a point where the tourism industry is thriving, no doubt, especially when it comes to the local industry, people from within the country are going towards these places and, spending a lot of money, which is, kind of empowering the local community. But then the lack of responsible tourism is causing a lot of dangers for the environment over there. So how do you think that this sort of environment can be created and how it's going to help?
Okay. Very often, tourism success is measured in numbers of people. And that is the wrong way to measure tourism, because 1,000 people a day coming through your village and looking at all the bazaar shops but not actually buying anything, all they're doing is wearing out the roads.
Yeah.
And they're useless. You don't want to encourage or have tourists like that.
Yeah.
And they bring their own food in a picnic and they chuck the trash out of the car window when they finish.
Absolutely.
And so what you need is a good yield. So people who want to come and enjoy the area, have a more of an inclusive holiday which involves guides and local transport and hospitality and restaurants. So you get a fuller picture and more people benefiting. Take Murray as an example.
Yeah.
Murray at a weekend is the most terrible place.
It's a mess.
It really is indescribable.
I've stopped going there. It's been years I haven't went
Absolutely.
there.
And if you've got bad weather, it's just exacerbated and it's even worse.
And it's the same in the summers and the winters.
Yeah.
It's overcrowded, zero management.
And so its infrastructure just isn't able to handle the volumes. And yet nothing is done to prevent cars coming in there. I asked some people in authority there recently, what is the average spend of a visitor to Murray on a Saturday? Well, they didn't know, which didn't surprise me altogether. But the average spend must be very, very small. They would be far better served to develop a huge car park system outside of town, and have electric buses doing a shuttle service in and out of the town. No cars allowed in the town at all except residents, and keep everybody out and charge a huge amount of money to park your car in the car park and to get the shuttle service in. A lot of people will then not bother.
Yeah.
They'll be discouraged. But those that do, that money will be going into the community.
Yes.
So there'll be actual benefit derived from the local people, the local population, and you will be able to make far better use of and enjoy the town. So that's an example. You don't want quantity, you want quality. You say that tourism is a success, and I would argue that it isn't particularly, because a lot of the people who have developed hotels in Hunza, as an example, they don't live there, they're not local people. They live in Lahore, or they live in Karachi, or they live in UAE or London or whatever. And they milk the place. They have a high season, sort of May to October, maybe April. They pack as many people in as they possibly can. They give the lowest amount of service they can, the lousiest food they can, and they close for the winter, and all the staff are out of work. Now, that for me is not a sustainable and successful tourism venture.
That's called seasonal tourism.
This is nonsense, but it is a fact of life. So, you know, and again, with a federal strategy that addresses all of this, you could come up with a far better approach to managing numbers, managing people, managing employees, supporting them, and you know, when there's downtime, then have group trainings for everybody, have group sessions, have little, you know, one of the things in Pakistan, there's lots of universities, fantastic, but there's very little vocational training facilities.
Yes.
And, you know, not everybody can be a manager. Most people are not managers.
Yes.
And they need to be trained as chefs and waiters and receptionists and housekeepers and bricklayers and plumbers and electricians. And all of this raft of core basic skills are needed to be developed in the country. And that is where there's a big lacking in education, I feel, which is something I go on about to various vice chancellors I know at various universities.
Right, right. What's your opinion about the environment being conducive? Because according to some tourists who have the respect for other cultures and, you know, cultural appropriation and whatnot, but still, living in Pakistan for like 4 years, it's a long time. I think this makes a period before COVID when you came to Pakistan. Things have changed completely. There is a 360-degree shift before and after COVID. So how do you think, or what do you think that the cultural conduciveness is you know, playing its part? Do you think that the tourists who, I'm not going to say complain, but I'm going to use the word comment, that when they comment about the cultural appropriation or the environment being conducive or not conducive for the tourists in Pakistan, how much do you agree to that and how much do you disagree to that? Or like simply, what do you have to say on this?
There's two types of tourism, domestic and international. And prior to COVID, the international tourism volume was slowly increasing and looking very promising. And quite a lot of moves at a governmental level were being made to facilitate and encourage that. COVID put the kibosh on that completely, and as we've emerged from COVID, a number of factors have made international travel to the country less of a popular proposition for tourism. So the bulk of tourism at the moment is domestic, and therefore I think from a cultural point of view there is a total understanding of the way a tourist from Karachi or Lahore will find themselves if they're in Hunza or vice versa. For international tourists, Pakistan still is, it's an adventure. And it's a very exciting adventure. It's a mysterious place. It's something that people don't know a lot about. They've got their impressions from very jaded and often inaccurate news media in the Western world, which presents Pakistan in a very negative light generally, which is very unfair. But that's another discussion. So when an international tourist is coming here, they're probably quite educated, they're probably quite adventurous, they're experienced travelers and probably open-minded. It's not the sort of destination where somebody who goes to the Costa Brava in Spain every year, knowing exactly what they're going to get, who they're going to see, how they're going to behave. Those aren't the sort of tourists that are going to be coming to Pakistan. So I think the international tourists coming here have a very positive approach and for the most part have a very positive experience. There's so much that Pakistan has to offer for tourists, whether it be the beauty of mountains and the scenery, whether it's the culture, the heritage, the food, the religions. People don't realize the sort of fundamental basis of the great religions, Buddhism and Hinduism and so on. They all have their hearts in this area. The old civilizations from Mohenjo-Daro and so on. These are just treasures that are unimaginable to people around the world. And so if you're coming here for whatever it is you want, you can have a fantastic experience, coupled with the natural hospitality of the people, the friendliness. I think it's the most outstanding destination and the world's best kept secret at the moment. So there's huge opportunity, and I think, I don't think there are barriers to whether it be, cultural, religion, booze, whatever. This isn't a factor that prevents an international tourist coming here to have a good experience.
Because some of the people, they do complain that there's nothing much to do. Pakistan does not have so much to offer other than the, scenic views and stuff like that. Probably they're asking for their sort of entertainment, which is not part of our culture.
Yeah, but they're coming to the wrong place.
Yes, exactly.
And I don't think at the moment there just isn't much volume of that sort of tourism coming anyway.
Yeah. About entertainment, what is your opinion that how this is interrelated with tourism or successful tourism? Does it play a part in attracting more tourists? By entertainment, I mean the representation, a proper representation of culture, music, art, theater, all the, you can say, the liberal arts that one knows. So do you think that it has a value that can be added to Pakistani tourism?
I think it's an add-on. It's not a reason for coming. You're not going to come to Pakistan for an entertaining holiday in the way that you might go to Thailand.
It's a very different world.
It's different, and it's much more sophisticated, and this is a much better country for getting a broader experience
Yeah.
of activities and treasures to take home.
Yeah.
Entertainment, by the far side, around a barbecue up in the north, and there's dancers and so on. That's lovely, and some of the festivals are great. And
Yes.
so there is, a Kailash festival is, if you can keep up with that, then
Yeah.
that's you're doing well. So there are these festivals which one could call entertainment, certainly, and it's part of the culture. But I don't think one is going to be able to build on that as a reason in itself for coming to Pakistan. It's an add-on, value added.
Basically, it's a place where one can come to unwind, especially if they're having, they have a lot of hustle going on in their life when it comes to work and stuff like that. So, they should pack their bags, come here, relax, enjoy the organic side of life, because Pakistan probably, I might agree with it, that it does not offer the tourists, especially those coming from the European end or the Western end, it does not offer what they're looking for. But I have also experienced it in the north, that people who are from the West, they go there and they're just, simply relaxing on a large boulder, on the heart of the mountains. They're living in the simplest hotels. They're not asking for too many facilities. Probably they're so tired with their caught-up routines back in their own hometowns that they want to, have a proper joy of the organic
Sure.
side.
I mean, I think, though, I have a sort of small business that brings in overseas tourists and gives them a very bespoke travel and holiday experience. And I don't give them a minute to relax.
Okay.
It's full on. And so, as an example, I had a couple over here in May, and they were here for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And they had a spell up in the north, they had a spell over in Peshawar, they had a Sindh Valley, Karachi, all the way up through Multan, up to Lahore, and then over. And, they went home to relax.
All right.
But they were blown away by it. They had the most incredible time. Because, and particularly if you do travel around the whole country, you see so many different facets of
There's so much to explore.
of things. So, and just the other day, a couple of people from Austria who were very much focusing on trekking in the north, and then others who want more of a cultural experience and historical and so on. So, I don't think this is a place to come to chill out and relax. I think this is a place to really give yourself a
Thrilling experience.
a thrilling, a cultural fix. This is a sensational country, and there's so much to see and do. And thankfully, we haven't developed the coastline yet, and people aren't going to be coming down for beach holidays. But it'll come, I suppose. But no, I think a tourist coming here needs to be given a full program.
Right. Tourism comes with a price, especially its impact on the climate. And the way Pakistan is getting affected by the climate change, it's in front of everybody. Do you think that tourism industry is playing a part, or do you think that there's another factor to it, especially keeping the events of last year, the catastrophic events that happened, the floodings and the devastation caused after that? There is another debate that I'm going to have, not debate, in fact, a discussion about the 1% emission and the 99% emission. We're going to talk about that later. But right now, what I want is to know your opinion. That do you think that Pakistan is suffering due to the influx of tourism and there is a climate disaster happening in Pakistan.
Okay, I think that there's two sort of elements to that. I don't think per se tourism impacts climate change. It's the other way around. What tourism does impact hugely is environmental degradation. And where it is not managed, then there is an environmental impact which can be catastrophic. And that's both inland, on mountains, in valleys, in the oceans eventually, and the impact on the oceans is a disaster. So unmanaged, unsustainable tourism has very, very negative impacts on environment. In terms of climate change and its impact on tourism, the other way around, there most certainly is an impact, and it's going to be growing.
Yeah.
Last year's floods manifested themselves very badly down in Sindh and the other parts of Pakistan, but the devastation started up in the mountains in the north, where glaciers were breaking up and melting, and suddenly you had these huge torrents coming down small valleys, rocks and ice, and I think just bashing and knocking bridges over, and roads destroyed, and so on. The floodgates from the dams in India of the rivers, which then come into Pakistan, is also another factor which impacts our flooding problems. And so these sort of factors, yes, definitely have an impact on tourism. Now, I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think there are opportunities to be looked at. So, for example, there is increased rainfall. Pakistan is getting now monsoons are wetter and longer and so on. But in high mountains, that rain is falling as snow.
Yeah.
And so there is a potential for the development of a vibrant skiing industry, winter sports industry. It's been flirted with, resorts like Malam Jabba, which aren't really very serious ski resorts, but it provides a little taster. But in Europe, the Alps are mostly low by comparison to our mountains, and so the snow winter sports season is getting shorter in the Alps, and people are going to be looking for new places to go skiing. And here there is, huge potential. Now, okay, some of the mountains are a bit too steep and too jagged for skiing, but there's a lot of places that are very good for it, for development. Take Astor Valley area as an example, but there's lots. So here we have opportunities which are being caused, in a sense, by climate change, which we could be taking advantage of.
Right.
So, I think it's very easy around the world to be saying climate change is destroying this, destroying that. And yes, it's having huge negative impacts, of course it is. But it doesn't mean one shouldn't pursue opportunities to minimize the impact and work at ways to mitigate against its negative impact.
So next question revolves around the wildlife and that being impacted or affected by, again, tourism or the influx of tourists. Again, the hunting seasons begin in certain areas. There are certain species that are now getting endangered, especially in the north, in the mountains. Even here, if you talk about the Margula Mountains, the mountain leopards, they are barely, they're saying probably 15 or 20 leopards left in the mountains. And most of them, not most of them, say about 2 or 3 are killed in the past 2 years by the locals with the fear of being attacked. That is another case, but when you go to the north, the ibex, they're endangered. There are other species that are getting really, really closer to, extinction. So do you think that there should be a policy, which apparently does not appear to me that there is a policy from the government to protect the wildlife? The local communities are really jumping in to protect, but then they're threatened with a lot of, you can say, some people actually complained to me who are working to protect these animals that they have been given death threats by the locals, not by the people who are into this business, not the outsiders, the locals. So what can be done to prevent, number one, the extinction, which is about to happen, and number two, how these local communities or these organizations can be helped to, protect the wildlife?
Everything comes down to money, right? And if you can show a case to a local community that they can get more money by keeping these creatures alive than by killing them and selling off their horns or taking hunters around, then it works.
Yes.
The African experiences in a number of places, countries, have shown this to be the case. So, tourism serves a purpose here, because if people can pay to come on snow leopard safari, you'll probably have a lot of disappointed tourists because they won't see any, but the concept would hold true. And, the local guides and the communities will benefit by having this tourism dollar come in to go along with us. Same with the ibex. Now there is a licensing system. I don't know whether it's a national one, but certainly in certain regions, licenses for hunting a certain number of these animals, and people pay a huge amount of money, foreign hunters to come and shoot. That money probably only goes to the people who own the land and isn't sort of distributed. But again, if one is able to extend and manage the licensing system and make sure more people get a piece of the action, this is not rocket science. It's doable and it's manageable. And I think it does vary according to regions. I think, for example, in Chitral, they've got it pretty tightly controlled. And the sort of dynasty that runs the region have it fairly tightly managed. And I think that's the issue. It varies from region to region. But the more you can share the benefit of tourism coming to see the animals with the communities, then that outweighs the money they'll get by the odd bit of poaching. And then it takes care of itself. But I'd add something else which is often forgotten, which is a creature that is very much on the brink of extinction now, which is the blind river dolphin. And they are, there's only about 1,000 to 1,500 left now in the Indus, and in the Ganges about 3,000. And they are declining because of more damming. The more dams, then it restricts their gene pool, and so they can't, go and travel and breed so easily. And fishing and pollution, and these creatures are really in a fix, and that's a real shame, because it's not easy to see what the solution is.
Yeah.
So, and you say to a poor fisherman, you know, don't kill a dolphin. Well, he's eating my fish. You know?
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Right. So starting from the mountains, now we're coming
But sorry,
to the
if
oceans.
I may,
Yeah.
again, bring tourism in. You go to Sukur, go out in the dusk
Yeah.
on a little boat, and you'll see them coming up to the surface.
Yeah.
And you can, in half an hour, you'll see 3 or 4 blind river dolphins. And that's a great thrill.
Yeah. So yeah, I was saying we're started from the mountains and now we're coming towards the oceans. And again, talking about the endangered species, one of the species that is closer to extinction is the sharks, which you mentioned earlier when we were discussing before starting the podcast, that there should be a fight to prevent their extinction. Now, I was surprised to know because sharks are probably what we're told in terms of knowledge through different documentaries or, you know, National Geographic channels, that sharks are everywhere. So they're not an endangered species. But coming this from you, I was caught by surprise that how, number one, explain us how this is happening and how this can be prevented, because they have a very important role in, you know, the food chain maybe of the ocean life.
I mean, there's even a direct link to climate change.
Climate change itself, yes.
Okay, sharks are being killed at the moment at the rate of about 100 million to 150 million
Wow.
a year.
And what is the reason?
And they are being killed for a variety of reasons. Shark fin soup was the biggest reason, which is a popular dish in China particularly. Now, it used to be a dish that only the wealthy could aspire to have. But with the rising standards of living in China over the last few years, more and more people have been able to afford and aspire to have dishes such as shark fin soup. And so every wedding, every function, every feast, every time you are wanting to promote yourself and show off, you definitely have shark fin soup. And so that has caused a huge surge in shark finning, which is the process of catching a shark, lopping its fins off and throwing it back into the sea,
And
which is
then it does
brutal.
not survive without
Yeah.
the fin.
So that's shark fin soup. And it is increasing in popularity around other parts of Southeast Asia. So huge numbers of sharks have been killed just for their fins. Now, they're also being killed, astonishingly enough, for accessories and health products. And although it was thought that China was the biggest consumer of sharks, actually the biggest consumer of sharks is Brazil, which eats them for its meat.
Okay.
And second is Italy, who take shark products for belts, handbags, shoes, lipsticks, other health products, beauty treatments. And at one stage for COVID-19, shark oils were being used as a part of the vaccine process. So poor old sharks are getting clobbered for all sorts of reasons. And it's unsustainable. They can't keep up with that sort of death rate. You know, they have a very long gestation period. They only have 1 or 2 pups. It takes a long time for a shark to mature, many years, and they just can't survive this onslaught. And some shark species are on the point of extinction, others less so, but they're in big trouble. The problem that causes is because sharks are the apex predator of the ocean, and they keep everything in balance. Now, let me give you an example of where things are getting badly out of balance. There's a thing called seagrass. Now, seagrass has the ability to absorb huge amounts of carbon dioxide.
Mm-hmm.
A hectare of seagrass absorbs twice as much CO2 as a hectare of tropical rainforest.
Wow.
Now, there's a particular creature that just loves seagrass called a manatee. And manatees eat, they're like hippos. They just eat and eat and eat seagrass.
And they have huge population.
Well,
When
they
they
have
grow,
a
then-
big enough, and
Yeah.
they're big creatures. But sharks love manatees.
Okay.
So they keep the manatees under control,
Okay.
and the manatees don't get to eat all the seagrass, and there's a balance.
Right.
But now manatees are growing, their populations are increasing, and the seagrass is diminishing. So you have less CO2 capture. And this is happening on a global basis. And
And that's why global warming is happening.
well, it is a contributory element. You know, we talk about all the time, it's CO2 emissions from
Yeah.
factories and so on. But,
But nobody's talking about this factor.
you know, it's things like this as well. It's the loss of plankton, which has
Yeah.
diminished by about 40% over the last 50 years. And they produce they produce maybe 70% of our oxygen. But if plankton are disappearing because of pollution and global and warming oceans, you know, there's a consequence. And so, you know, the big hits are power generation and so on. But, you know, there's so many other things that need to be looked at.
Do you think that there should be a global conference in the, let's say in the UN to protect these animals and you know the things that are causing global warming? Because you know each time if there is a war, you know countries get together and you know start passing different sorts of you know constitutions and you know their votes and vetoes and whatnot, but when it comes to saving the planet, there's no sense of emergency we see from these organizations that, I mean, I think this is part of their job, to protect the environment as well as the humanity. So when the environment is not protected, where are the humans going to go?
You know, I think it's a nice idea, but I'm afraid I'm far too pessimistic to consider that there's any possibility of such conferences having any effect. There's COP28 coming up next, the annual conference to address global warming. It's going to be as ineffective as the last 27 have been.
It's just talks, mere talks.
Yeah, you
No
know,
steps are taken.
everything's a bit, you know, like in Egypt, the last one.
Yeah.
The principal sponsor was Coca-Cola, who produce X billion plastic bottles a year
Yeah.
of their product. You know, instead of saying all bottle, you know, soda companies have 3 years to get yourself off plastic bottles. End of story. UN directive number so-and-so.
Yeah.
You know, the UN is the body, but they have no teeth. And our global leadership is so lacking, and our nations are so much, you know, they're getting increasingly confrontational with each other over all sorts of issues. I see very little hope of mankind coming together in any cohesive manner to address sharks.
Exactly.
You know, it's
We're
just not
simply
going to happen.
consuming the environment and the facilities that were provided. We're consuming it at such a speed that probably in the next 10, 20 years, by say about 2050, this place is going to be a disaster for humans to live in.
Well, it's going to be very challenging. It's going to be very different.
If steps are not taken by now.
You see that migration is going to be a bigger factor than people can really get their heads around at the moment. The internal migration, so around the Sukkur area,
Yeah.
it's consistently getting temperatures of over 50 degrees at the moment in the summer. Islamabad is the hot point in particular. Now, you can't live in that.
Yeah.
Animals can't live in that. So populations around that region are going to have to move. They'll probably move around other parts of Pakistan, whatever, but mass migration because of conflict, because of hunger, because of impact of global warming, ocean level rises, people are going to be moving in huge numbers. And, you know, the resources and funds needed to address that are inevitably going to take priority over sharks and, you know, this sort of thing. So it's, we're in a bit of a mess.
I think
We need to sort of stop the planet. have
take a
think.
break.
Let's sort everything
Yeah.
out, you know, and
Reset the system,
Reset.
maybe. Yeah, and I think this should be addressed in the universities and schools and colleges and educational institutions where children are given the sense of responsibility towards environment.
I lecture to quite a few universities around Pakistan and other countries as well. And I also, when I can, lecture at school level. And I had a lecture I did at a school in Islamabad here. And it was a group of about 70 4 to 6-year-olds. And it was entitled Listen to the Oceans. It was all about oceans and
Yeah.
the effect of environmental problems and so on, where it all comes from, and starts in the mountains. Little blue bag comes down and, you know, goes into the oceans, and a turtle eats it because it thinks it's a jellyfish. All of this. And these kids were fantastic. They really got it. They understood it. They grasped it. They were enthusiastic. It was fantastic. And I was going into it a bit nervous, you know, haven't sort of had to confront a group like that before, and they were sensational.
Yeah.
So the youngsters get it, and thank goodness, because it's going to be their generations going to live with the consequence of our mismanagement of the planet.
You're right about children of this age group being more sensitive and responsive towards the information that is given to them. Like my niece, she's 8 years old. 2 years ago, when she was 6, I told her that she was trying to pluck a leaf off the tree. And I told her that, you know, they have sensors and they feel pain when you pluck them out. Why are you plucking it out? Is there a reason? And she goes, I just like the color, I want it. I said, I built a story and I said, you know, it cries, but you cannot hear it. It says, ouch, when you pluck it, but you cannot hear it. Just like I'm going to pinch you and you're going to feel the pain, but you're going to express your pain. This plant, however, it won't be able to express its pain. But just because it's not expressing, it doesn't mean that you can hurt it. So she took it so seriously that the next day she saw her father and he was plucking off some branches because they were dried up. And she came running to me crying that, I'm trying to convince Daddy and he's not listening to me. He's hurting the plant. Please go stop him. He's hurting the plant. And she was literally in tears. And she said, I felt the pain. I'm feeling really painful for these branches, the way he's plucking them off. And my brother was like, what weird stories have you been telling her? You know, don't make her so oversensitive that, you know, she carries this legacy like that. And I said, no, look, if we don't take initiatives from this age, she'll become, you know, less sensitive, and there will be a point in her life where she won't be caring, you know, people cutting the trees off, and she'll, you know, pass by. We're all, you know, bystanders right now, people who are damaging the environment. We're not stopping their hands. We have no words to say to them to, you know, tell them about the consequences. Or something that is evident, it's right in front of us, you know, there are a lot of things that are happening, and we're unable to tell them or stop them. So I think we need to create that sense of responsibility, that sort of sensitivity into this generation, because probably we've lost it.
It's a general respect
Yeah.
for our environment and our planet and each other. And,
Yeah.
you know, it's animals, it's humans, it's vegetation, it's sea creatures, all of these organisms, we're all here together.
Yeah.
And if we don't respect it and don't look after it,
It's going to be a
the
very
thing
sad
is
story then.
the Earth is going to win out, but we're not.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, that's how nature works. All right, so now from a very different world, jumping from towards a very different world. Like we were talking about the environment, we're talking about Earth, mountains, oceans, species, and whatnot. And now we're moving to the technology. Okay, so discussion is taking a 360-degree turn. You're an accomplished writer as well. You have written so many books. Being a writer, since I have been into writing as well, so what I believe is that it's an incredible talent that can never be replaced if a person, especially they're gifted, and they can write, no matter what it is, if it's a poem, lyrics, story, script, speech, anything. With the influx of AI now, do you think that a writer should feel threatened, or you as a writer, what are your feelings towards this technological development, especially in writing?
okay, so writing is a means of communication.
Yeah.
And we need to communicate for a whole variety of different reasons. To exchange views, to give instructions, to share experiences, to entertain. And so I think AI, for example, and these new systems that are coming along have various applications which are appropriate for some of those communication medium. In terms of creative writing, I don't see that it has such a big place.
Okay.
Because certainly at the moment, it can write something academically, but it can't infuse emotion. It can't share an experience.
Yeah.
It could probably share an experience if it's been programmed, but if for example, you've been in a forest, in a fire in Hawaii, and you want to write that down, you're not going to be able to say to an AI thing, write down what it was like being in that fire and escaping the fire. Because you're not going to be able to share the horror, the fear, the appalling environment, the suffocating air, and describe that.
Yeah.
So personally, I certainly don't feel threatened. Myself, I write fiction, and I write based on personal experiences. And, you know, I don't see any threat at all. And if somebody comes along and says, well, you're wrong, fine, I don't care.
Yeah.
But if I was to be writing a report on, I'll give you an example. I was doing some research for a project in the north recently, and I wanted to understand the average snowfall per month at given heights in a certain mountain area. And I wanted statistics going back over the last 5 years. And I thought, well, I know, AI's got the answers to everything. So I went into ChatGPT and said, this is what I want. And it said, sorry, I can't do it after 2021. Don't have the data. And I said, well, that's not very good, is it?
Yeah.
And then it said, how about you try? And then it gave me some ideas of possible other sources where I could get the information, which I was able to do. And I thought that was very good. And I thought that was very clever. And I thought that is exactly what the benefit of an AI system should be.
Yeah.
It's a tool to help man achieve that which he wishes to do.
Yeah.
So that I found impressive. But I wouldn't ask it to write a story for me.
Right. But I think that the basic purpose of creating AI was to help people who are running businesses and they lack the ability of writing. So probably, they might be needing small captions or, to describe about their product or, the language that is described on a website to tell about your business and, whatnot. But now we've seen that there are people who are using AI into their fiction work, in drama writing, in movie writing, which is becoming a bit scarier for the people who are working in the movie industry. Because, like we were discussing before, when we, before beginning the podcast, that a sense of insecurity is prevailing among the writers of Hollywood because the producers and the directors probably they no longer care about the value and the quality of writing that is coming from a writer's end, because probably they're running short on time, they have timelines. Most of the industry, the cinema industry, is now working for Chinese screens. And they have timelines. They don't care about the story. They just, care about the glamorous screen, the CGI, and, stuff like that. So in that case, if a writer is not met a certain deadline, probably in a few years, do you think that these producers and these directors will be, kicking them out and, it'll be replaced by the AI?
Yeah, I think that's a distinct possibility. But I think also there will always be a place for quality. It might thin down the number of writers, but you see an awful lot of pretty rubbishy movies produced.
Yeah.
And I find it astonishing just how bad most of them are.
And they're doing enormous businesses. I don't know
Sure,
how.
well, good for them, but
Probably
they're pretty silly. Most
there are a
of them.
lot of questions that I
So
need
when
answers for.
when a good movie comes out,
Yeah.
which is well written, well produced, well directed, cinematography is good, it stands tall.
Yeah.
And so I think there will always be the requirement for good quality script writers, in the same way that there will be for everything else. So I don't think, yes, there will be some people who suffer and some people will lose work and their businesses. But for the top quality, I think there'll always be a place.
And do you think that in a long run, people will realize that, okay, it had its shelf life and now it's over, so, we should go back to our roots? Just like it's happening with the digital money. I'm just giving out an example that Bitcoin was the talk of the town. Everybody was talking about it, but slowly and gradually now it's, it's fading away from the topics, from the daily routine discussions because it's losing its impact. So do you think that the same can be happening to?
I think it's less likely with IT generally. I think it accelerates at such a pace
Okay.
that most of us can't keep up with it. And only a few people are really
Yeah.
in the know about how it's developing. And I think we are so totally dependent upon IT now, whether it's our mobile phones or whether it's, our laptops or whatever. I don't see there's a way back unless it's sort of post-Armageddon. But I think artificial intelligence and its, and the next generations of it, it will just keep changing and modifying and growing and having more and more influence.
Right.
But I don't think it means the end of mankind. I mean, I think, learn to live with it, learn to adapt, get the best out of it that you can, use it as a tool,
Yeah.
and adapt.
Right, right. So do you feel like, I mean, it's just a question. Ignore it if you don't want to answer it. But being a writer, would you at any point like to add this tool into your work?
No.
Take help.
Not at all.
I mean, taking help is a big word for an accomplished writer, but then just trying it out.
I wouldn't, because as I write, I think visually. I see a scene. I see it acting out on a totally visually. My books are big on script, short on a lot of heavy description and so on. And I'll give you an example. There's one book called The Maritime Betrayal, and it's about the oceans.
Okay.
And it starts with a young girl who's 12 years old going on her first shark dive with her father.
Okay.
And, okay, it's a 12-year-old girl, but the description of the event was my first shark dive, because I was very keen on scuba diving. And you cannot describe, or I don't think an AI
Yes.
thing could describe the feeling of sitting there on the ocean floor
Yeah.
with a shark coming straight to your face to say hi, and then finding yourself surrounded by about 14 sharks,
Yeah.
all saying hi.
And then how the water feels on your skin, or the salt water going into your eyes, or the impact.
the feeling
Yes.
is very difficult to describe, and it is very, very exciting. And to convey that feeling in words, you've got to do the experience. You can't make it up.
Yeah.
Well, you can make it up, but it won't be true. So,
Exactly.
it'd be an interesting test to say to an AI thing, write me a paragraph on a first shark dive and see what it says.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll do that.
It'll be
later.
very bland.
But it'll be,
boring and bland.
I think to write with emotion, with feeling,
Yeah.
with depth, and hopefully with skill and,
Yeah.
and writing correctly. Anyway, I don't see it either as a threat to me or in any way will it change my.
But like you said, that people should use it wisely, those who want to use it as a tool.
It's not to say that I wouldn't use it. I mean, I tried it again recently with a website. I was asked to write some homepage about us, history and so on. And so I knew the basics, and I programmed in, write a couple of paragraphs on this. And I wrote one as well and showed it to the person whose site it was for. And I said, that's rubbish. No, that's good, which was the one I'd written. And the AI option was very bland, and it was, it had no feeling.
It's actually getting so interesting that I don't want to stop, but the thing is that we're running short on time, so I would say...
Come back next week.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to have another session, definitely. It was very, very interesting, and it was an honor having you on my show.
It's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Charles, and I'm looking forward to the next session. That's all for today, and I hope you enjoyed. Let us know down below in the comment section, what do you think of this discussion? We'll see you next time. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.